Welcome back to New World Next Week. I'm James Corbett at CorbettReport.com.
I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Deeply loving, wise, and funny. She was a beacon to survivors and victims. We have that sad story. Plus, 50 years since the fall of Saigon, and Agent Orange is still in the killing fields. But first, we begin in the dark. Net zero blamed for Europe's biggest power cut. A reliance on net zero energy left Spain and Portugal vulnerable to the mass blackouts engulfing the region, experts said on Monday night. Again, this story just a couple of days ago. It is believed to be Europe's largest power outage, we might say, here in the States. Tens of millions of people left without electricity, flights were grounded, trains halted, and whole cities left without power, internet access, or other vital services. The cause of the initial fault in the region's electricity grid, of course, still being investigated by those experts. And the EU has insisted there were no indications that it was a cyber attack, i.e. Russia. However, energy experts have blamed a heavy reliance on solar and wind farms in Spain for leaving the region's power grid vulnerable to such a crisis. A state of emergency declared in Spain, while in Portugal, water company EPAL said supplies could also be disrupted. Let's put it all online. Queues formed at shops of people seeking to purchase emergency supplies like gas lights, which I would argue is a lot of the people's problem in the first place. Too much gas lighting. Yeah. But everybody, of course, lining up when it's too late, when the toothpaste is out of the tube. Oh, I'm going to go buy some generators and batteries now. No, you're not. You're going to stand in line. You got to plan ahead. Energy operators fighting to restore power in Spain and Portugal and parts of France, and residents are being urged to avoid travel and use mobile phones sparingly. Tens of thousands of British travelers could be potentially affected by airport disruption in the region, because that's what we're most concerned about. Spain has seen a massive increase. This is probably coming from UK press. Spain has seen a massive increase in renewable and low-carbon energy generation in recent years. 2 decades ago, more than 80% of its power came from burning fossil fuels such as coal and gas, as well as nuke. Solar and wind provided less than 5%. By 2023, renewable energy provided 50.3% of power, and by Monday, the proportion of renewables was far higher. Around noon, just before the crash, solar was providing about 53% of Spain's electricity, with another 11% from wind, a lot of this coming from Red Electrica's own data, their awesomely named power company. Gas was providing about 6%. On Monday, Spain was forced to activate emergency measures to restore electricity across parts of northern and southern Spain, including switching hydroelectric plants across the country back on and importing power through giant cables with France and Morocco. Traditional energy systems have mechanisms which allow them to keep running even if there is a shock, such as a surge or loss of power. However, solar and wind can't do that stuff. 6 days after celebrating 100% renewable power, Spain blames rare atmospheric phenomenon for nation's largest blackout in history. And of course, there could be Carrington events, the electromagnetic pulses. Any of that is absolutely possible and maybe probable. Another analysis says Spain was running its grid with very little of what's called dispatchable spinning generation. Therefore, power plants were not able to quickly adjust their output to keep the grid stable. And there was also just a few moments prior to the blackout, Spain terminates Israeli ammo contract after uproar threatened to topple the coalition. So, James, you got Spain, you got the sun, and you just got maybe poor power systems.
Indeed. I'm not going to pretend here to be an expert on this power generation and how the grid works, but I invite people to go and look at some of the links we're providing about dispatchable spinning generation and the inertia of the grid, and versus rotational generation as opposed to inverter generation and all of this. Long story short, from what I can surmise, as people might expect, when you go to the 100% renewable, hey guys, we're totally green now. People, I think, would expect, well, what about a cloudy day? Wouldn't that affect this? In this case, it was actually too much sun, apparently. Too much energy dumping into the grids during the afternoon, midday sun, and they weren't able to adjust the grid in time for it to avert this blackout. So anyway, that actually makes it even worse for the net zero guys, because not only is there the problem of, hey, what if it's not a windy day? What if it's a cloudy day? There's also the problem of, what if it's too windy? What if there's too much sun? So unless it's exactly right, the grid will not function, at least as it is designed at the moment. But don't worry, I'm sure they could spend bajillions of dollars converting the entire grid over to some new system that will also fail in times of crisis, generated or otherwise. But maybe that's the point. And so I will refer back, not for the first time, not for the last time, to a editorial I wrote in 2021 entitled Absolute Zero, the Global Agenda Revealed, talking about a report from the UK FIRES Group, which is an amalgamation of a bunch of researchers from a bunch of different upstanding universities like Oxford and Imperial College and all of the usual suspects, talking about, oh, net zero, come on, guys, that's weak sauce. We want absolute zero. Not like we can offset this here or there. No, like literally zero carbon generation. And they talk about how that's going to be made possible by, for example, all airports in the UK, except Heathrow, Glasgow, and Belfast, will close in the next decade, and all air traffic will cease by the year 2050. All existing forms of blast furnace production and all existing forms of cement production will be halted by the year 2050. All naval shipping will cease by the year 2050. All consumption of beef and lamb will cease by the year 2050. And of course, all non-renewable energy production will cease by 2050. In other words, you will eat the bugs and you will like it, peasant, is what they are telling you to your face. Is the plan. Don't believe me. Go and read the actual Absolute Zero report that I'm linking up to get it from the criminals' own words. They want you to live like medieval peasants while they are jetting around to their climate conferences and carving out vast swaths of the Amazon rainforest in order to do so. But let's not just leave this on the doom and gloom. There is, I suppose, there is a way that we can look at this as, at the very least, as you point out, you know, the time to get ready for this was not during the blackout, it was before the blackout. And for those people who were prepared and do have local communities that they have fostered of real human beings who can come together in times of crisis, those people just got an excellent test of what that looks like. And I will throw in this International Reporter report that comes to me from a listener named Melanie. She was linking to Celia Farber's Substack, who was linking to this report called Mass Blackout in Spain Shows the Power of Local Communities. And it's talking about some of the wonderful things that happen during these times of crisis, like people checking on neighbors and the elderly, people sharing food and cooking outdoors, people helping strangers to get home and making the most of the moment, etc., and talking about dancing, singing, people coming together in the real physical world to communicate and in actual face-to-face, in real-life talks instead of just texting your friend from your couch. So there are some, at the very least, these moments of crisis can be a good reminder of what human community is and why it is important to maintain that as we go plunging off the cliff of this absolute zero agenda.
I am very glad you've got some positive news to add into this story. It wasn't too long after we had moved to New Mexico, James, back in 2018, and I'm like, why don't they put solar panels on everything all the time here and we could just have nothing but sun? There's too much. Too much sun can be too intense for too many solar panels. It's just like, good grief. Okay, well, I guess we better dim the sun then. Not dim the sum. That's a different type of snack. But hey, James, at least us in the States, we aren't going to be beholden to that World Health Organization treaty, because I think we're going to be out of that thing. That's how we get going on New World Next Week, episode 589. And our second story is one that, when things move so quickly, it maybe didn't hit me immediately. And then the days go by and you're like, this is a giant deal. R.I.P. Virginia Giuffre, accuser of Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein, dies at the age of 41. Just grabbing this from mainstream MSN.com. And again, everything we say and play always included down in the show notes. Virginia Giuffre, Giuffre, Virginia Giuffre, who accused Britain's Prince Andrew, was given a giant undisclosed settlement sum from Prince Andrew. An other influential man of sexually exploiting her as a teenager, trafficked by disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein, has died aged 41 in an apparent suicide at a farm in Western Australia. Her publicist has confirmed this. Deeply loving, wise, and funny, she was a beacon to other survivors and victims, publicist Deanie von Muffling said in a statement. She adored her children and many animals. She was always more concerned with me than with herself. I will miss her beyond words. It was the privilege of a lifetime to represent her. The American-born Virginia Giuffre, who lived in Australia for years, became an advocate for sex trafficking survivors after emerging as a central figure in Epstein's prolonged downfall. The wealthy, well-connected New York money manager Epstein, if you don't recall, committed suicide August 2019 while awaiting trial on U.S. federal sex trafficking charges involving dozens of teenage girls and young women, some as young as 14, trafficked to nobody. I guess. The charges came 14 years after police in Palm Beach in Florida first began investigating allegations that he sexually abused underage girls who were hired to give him massages. Giuffre came forward publicly after the initial investigation ended in an 18-month Florida jail term for Epstein, who made a secret deal to avoid federal prosecution by pleading guilty instead to relatively minor state-level charges of just soliciting prostitution. He was released in 2009, and people then continue to do business with him, everybody from Donald Trump to Noam Chomsky. In subsequent lawsuits, Giuffre said she was a teenage spa attendant at Mar-a-Lago, U.S. President Donald Trump's Palm Beach club. Can you imagine? I mean, Mark Carney, an Epstein-connected thug, being your president? Oh, wait. When she was approached in 2000 by Epstein's girlfriend and later employee Ghislaine Maxwell. Giuffre said Maxwell hired her as a masseuse for Epstein, but the couple effectively made her a sexual servant, pressuring her into gratifying not only Epstein, but his friends and associates. Giuffre flown around the world for assignations with men assignments, including Prince Andrew when she was aged only 17-18. The men denied it and assailed Giuffre's credibility. She acknowledged changing some key details of her account, including the age at which she first met Epstein. But many parts of her story were supported by documents, witness testimony, photographs, including one of her and Prince Andrew, that famous one, with his arm around her bare midriff in Maxwell's London townhouse. Giuffre said in one of her lawsuits that she had sex with the royal 3 times in London during her 2001 trip, at Epstein's New York mansion when she was 17, and in the Virgin Islands when she was 18. Epstein's death in 2019 put an end to her hopes of holding him criminally accountable. And remember, his guards got off scot-free for falsifying their records about actually watching this guy in his jail cell. Attorney for Epstein victims says Giuffre's death must be fully investigated. An attorney for Epstein victims says the world deserves a full public investigation into Giuffre's sudden death and full disclosure of any evidence still hidden. Too long, didn't read. She allegedly got in a car wreck a few weeks ago, and even that whole story seems really weird. She posts somehow when she's all messed up from a car wreck, or someone posts some weird photo of her that I swear looks like a makeup tutorial for movie special effects. You know, I'm a horror movie guy. It looks like something out of Fangoria or Cinefax. Then she dies suddenly, and her lawyer says it's suspicious, but her brother says it is suicide. I would like to, here's my wild hope. They ducked her out into the witness protection program, and she is in hiding until, bam, she makes a shock appearance at Jizzy's trial. James actually was a guest. You know, I don't do a lot of shows. I was a guest on our buddy Ricky Veranda's show on Monday, Union of the Unwanted, and it was episode 107. Burmis had a bunch of good stuff on this, James, as we say R.I.P. to, what, another suicide of convenience?
It certainly looks that way. Now, let me state up front, unfortunately, I don't have any good news to bring to this story, but I do have some information, at least. For people who are interested, I just posted up a Solutions Watch where I was talking to Nick Bryant of EpsteinJustice.com. Of course, Nick Bryant, who wrote The Franklin Scandal, Nick Bryant, who published Epstein's Black Book back in 2015. So he's been around this case for a long time. He knew Giuffre. So I talked to him about his initial reaction to this. He says he's working on an article about this specifically. And at the time we're recording this, Thursday, 9:37 a.m. Japanese Standard Time, I don't believe that's been released yet, but I'm very much looking forward to it. In the meantime, people can check out that edition of Solutions Watch for our conversation. But Bryant raises all sorts of interesting points about, as you say, the craziness of the past few months in particular with regards to Giuffre's story. Not only the bus crash that, as you say, there's that weird picture, and she was tweeting, Instaing, whatever at the time about how she was given 4 days to live, had renal failure, but then she was out of hospital, and then apparently, then she was giving exclusive interviews to People magazine about how she had been physically abused by her husband, and then her husband filed a restraining order against her, which she broke by phoning him, and there was some legal thing going on with regard to that. There was questions about whether the bruises and things was she in hospital because of the bus crash, which was apparently a minor crash, or was it something related to this physical abuse? All sorts of craziness going on in that past few months, and culminates in, well, her seeming death. I would sincerely like to believe, it was a witness protection program kind of move, but it seems like she is dead, and her family is at least saying that it was suicide. Of course, I don't have any inside information. I don't know anything that anyone out there doesn't know about this. I do think it is at least a possibility that she committed suicide. Although she did tweet in 2019, "I will not commit suicide. There are powerful forces against me." 2019 was, of course, a very, very active and weird year for everyone involved with the Epstein case. So a lot has changed since then. I think it's at least possible that she actually did just commit suicide. And I say that because I think there's the conspiratainment sort of side of this that, if it's murder, then it's interesting. Oh, it was just suicide. Who cares? Who cares about Virginia Giuffre if she actually did kill herself? That's boring. I want it to be some salacious, murder plot or something. No, the point is, when someone is tortured, raped, sexually abused, sent around the world at the behest of this billionaire as part of this pedophile ring with all these high-level royals and political figures, and then ends up killing herself as a result of that, if that is what happens, that's still a tragedy. We should still care, even if this wasn't murder. And I just want to say that because I know that it's very interesting to get in there and start making it sort of conspiratainment oriented, but I think this death is absolutely tragic, and no less so even if it was at quote-unquote her own hands. But really, what does that mean to someone who's been abused throughout her entire life?
We've talked so many times about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Like, that guy would confess to anything. They've tortured him for decades. And 2019, that was a rather eventful year in the Epstein story. The part I would throw in is it's been a rather difficult 6 years since 2019 for every living human on this spinning globe. Oh, I said spinning globe. And think about Diddy sitting in jail. He's probably seen the news about some Epstein-connected victim is dead. Wild. Now, not to invoke too much Noam Chomsky, that there's enough known conspiracies, we don't have to go off and try to create all kinds of other stories where they may not be there. That's definitely a biggie, though. James, I want to also mention, we should mention the date, that it is essentially Walpurgis Beltane. So one of those kind of high occult holidays I have said on Media Monarchy for 20 years. Should pretty much always keep an eye out from the Ides of March all the way through the Ides of April, of course, through 420 and all the way up to May the 1st. I'm sure probably some big events waiting for us to jump on, with conspiratainment? And does that help serve our lives? Does that help learn our way forward? I think we got a lot of questions about that, James, as you and I have now been in this for a combined 30-plus years. I do want to mention not just one media appearance by yours truly in the last week. I had a second appearance, James. I made it to No Agenda. Media Monarchy remixed on No Agenda. It was some of my editorializing and dialogue from this very show, New World Next Week, and it was only our previous episode talking about we're going to know the causes of autism come September, so says RFKJ. I don't know who made the mix. It is fantastic. They called it Scream Circle. I played it on my morning show this morning, so I do feel a little bit like, man, I've been on No Agenda. I think between, hanging out with Corbett and being on No Agenda, it's pretty good so far for my 20th anniversary. Our third and final story, speaking of anniversaries, holy moly, 50 years today since the fall of Saigon. You might recall when Brandon cut and run out of Afghanistan a couple of years ago. It was a giant disaster. Not that we should have ever been there, but there are proper ways that you can kind of wrap up an operation. These are not how you do that. 50 years after the war ended, Vietnam still grappling with the legacy of Agent Orange. Decades after the fall of Saigon, helicopters pushed off of aircraft carriers. Millions are still dealing with the legacy of the Vietnam War. There's not good pictures of Monsanto DuPont spraying defoliants everywhere as there are of, helicopters getting pushed off of aircraft carriers. The chemical ghost of Agent Orange, a potent herbicide used by U.S. forces, haunts generations, leaving a legacy of disability and suffering. The remnants of this stockpile continue to contaminate the local environment, poisoning the food, poisoning the water, everything consumed by the residents. During the war with Vietnam, a rousing success for America, U.S. forces doused Vietnam with 72 million liters of defoliants in an attempt to deprive enemy forces of cover. They were trying to kill the trees and the weeds. Over half of this deluge consisted of Agent Orange, a herbicide contaminated with dioxin, a highly toxic chemical linked to cancer, birth defects, and widespread environmental damage. Today, the grim toll of this chemical warfare continues to mount, with an estimated 3 million Vietnamese, many of them children, grappling with debilitating health problems attributed to Agent Orange. Again, huge thanks to Dow, DuPont, and Monsanto. 50 years on, U.S. elites learned nothing from Vietnam defeat. A pretty great piece from antiwar.com, and we'll even just include the Wikipedia link to learn about the fall of Saigon. I often say Wikipedia it's a fantastic place to start. You can go look and you can get your basic dates and facts, and then you can kind of take it from there, and you don't even have to ask AI. James, I would also throw in, this didn't just, and it's justified, this didn't just happen to the Vietnamese, it messed up all the American dudes too. I've told the story of seeing the guys back in my hometown. Don't thank me, help me. All messed up, all eaten up from Agent Orange. And what do they want? Some cannabis. Now, I mentioned on my morning show, back when this last story I'm going to mention was popping off and we were still in a crappy apartment complex in Santa Fe, I was like, death penalty for landlords? I could get behind that. Trong My-Lan's death sentence upheld. She must pay $1.2 million in court fees. How one woman stole 3% of Vietnam's GDP. James, let's lynch the landlord on this 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon.
Let's do it. Agent Orange brought to you by what American corporation again? Oh, right, Monsanto. Right, of course. So I will throw in a link, Agent Orange, background on Monsanto's involvement from the Business and Human Rights Resource Center, which includes such stories, 2018 even, Vietnam demands Monsanto pays compensation for Agent Orange victims. So does Monsanto even exist anymore? I guess Bayer's on the line for it now. Anyway, crazy story there. Crazy story in general, as you say, about the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. And as part of the 50th anniversary coverage at covertactionmagazine.com, they have a new lengthy article up about, did legendary filmmaker Ken Burns, whose documentary revealed harsh truths about the Civil War, intentionally hide harsh truths about the Vietnam War to whitewash the CIA? Spoiler, the answer is yes. Yes, they did. And this article goes into a lot of detail about that. Ostensibly, it's talking about Ken Burns' famous Vietnam War documentary, which he defended by saying, well, look, it got financial support from across the spectrum, so it must be balanced, fair and balanced. Yeah, across the spectrum, everyone from the Ford and Rockefeller Brothers funds to the Koch brothers. Yay. So we've covered all the big financial oligarch philanthropies. right? But no, as this article goes on, and then the article goes on in great detail about the CIA and its involvement in Vietnam and what was really going on there. So it's definitely a good read for people who want to get caught up on sort of the deeper background, the intelligence agency background to what was going on there. At any rate, hey, 50 years is a long time, and one wonders what they will be writing about, say, the pullout from Afghanistan 50 years from now. But we are here documenting it as it goes, and so let's keep doing it.
Now, isn't it interesting that I've got both limited controlled parties, funding my propaganda piece? It reminds me, it's sort of the same reason Cokes and the Pepsis don't really talk about election fraud anymore, because they both benefit from it now, extremely so.
I'm just thinking Coke should be Koch, the Cokes and the Pepsis.
So now do I have to question everything I learned from the Ken Burns baseball documentary?
I'm thinking about the Ken Burns jazz documentary. It was Wynton Marsalis.
Or the country music
He's
documentary.
covering up the CIA.
One of his, actually, he did an early one. This was before he only made epic week-long documentaries. One of his earliest ones is called Empire of the Air, about the beginnings of my favorite subject, radio. So speaking of radio and video and internet and all of media, NewWorldNextWeek.com is your source for Media Monarchy and Korber Report gear and DVDs and hats, and the way to support our work and keep us fear-free and ad-free. And James, what I have not mentioned in quite some time is the post office box. You guys, don't forget about the post office box. I run the American post office box, so you guys can send support not only to me, but also I can shovel it over to my buddy James Corbett. And that is a great way. I won't go so far as to say it's the original untrackable, decentralized communications forum, but it's sure looking like one of the better ones now, while we still have it. I am working on big things behind the scenes at the Media Monarchy Kingdom. I talk about streaming Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. What if I streamed Media Monarchy, all news channels and all music channels, 24/7? Me and my buddy Jason are working on those, and that will be for Media Monarchy members only. I've never taken away anything from the free audience, James. Again, as you and I have said for our combined 30 years, the morning show, the podcasts are free, and they always will be. But some of these new things, those are going to be behind the paywall, and I think it will be absolutely worth it. If you didn't know, I'm kind of a cool radio, music, and news guy. So you can come check all of that out at MediaMonarchy.com/join. And indeed, I play the exclusive audio of these New World Next Week episodes before they're published, right after my morning show Thursday. That is at MediaMonarchy.com/listen. James, by my count, that is episode 589.
Awesome. And I'm very excited to hear about the new stuff you're working on. And, we'll have more to say about that as the 20th anniversary of Media Monarchy marches on. No doubt. I should just put the caveat on the P.O. Box thing that you mentioned there earlier. Whenever you send anything into the P.O. Box, please also send a note just explaining what it's for, who it's for, what your email address is, all that kind of good stuff, so we know who to assign things to. The other deprogramming note I should mention is there will be no New World next week because Brock West will be flying into Japan. Me and Sean will be gearing up, getting ready for the book launch, the Reportage book launch. So if you happen to be in Osaka on May 10th, please come by. The details are on my website, or you can email Sean here to get those details. And also, thanks in advance for all those people who are no doubt going to email Sean over the course of the next 2 weeks wondering, where is New World next week? Are you guys dead? And Sean will definitely be happy to answer those emails as they come in. So thank you guys for that. And thank you, James, for doing what you do. Let's do it again in 2 weeks.
Thanks so much, buddy. Take care, man.